Okay, very nice. So thank you for the Help Network. I don't know if you guys know about, I mean, obviously they're setting this thing up, but they're some good friends of mine and awesome group of people. And so thank you for joining up with them. And thank you for coming on with me this morning on your, what is today, Thursday? Today, Thursday? Yeah, Thursday morning. Okay. So my name is Jamie Christopherson, and I've been doing media music for, gosh, a long time now, 20 years. And just give a little introduction about myself before we get into my little presentation. I grew up in Los Angeles and always knew that I wanted to get into writing music for film and TV. And so, yeah, growing up in LA, I got to meet a bunch of composers growing up and kind of study with them. And then I went to school at Vassar College and studied music. And basically growing up, I played in jazz bands, rock bands, and things like that. And but I always knew that I wanted to get into film music. And so I went to school for all of that. And then when I got back to LA after University of Miami, I discovered that I also grew up playing video games. So I discovered that video games had come a long way from the beeps and the blips and all that kind of stuff. So when I discovered how far they had come, I got really excited about that. So that's where my foray got into interactive music. So I'm gonna kind of tailor this talk to, I've written music for all kinds of media, and I'm gonna talk about a little bit of the differences of approaching writing music for media in different genres, like film music versus video game music, what that means, what interactive music means, and how you would approach that from a technical standpoint. I don't know the who else is composers in this room, or who else is just interested in music. It's hard to get a show of hands on Zoom, but any other composers in the room? I'm looking at the text now. Active composer, nice. Okay, so a bunch of ambient music, nice. Sarah Lopez. Okay, so seems like a bunch of other composers. And then what else do you guys do? Any like film directors or sound designers and things like that? Okay, songwriters, nice. Sound design, yeah. Okay, yeah, so I also did sound design when I got back to LA, and I worked at a company called Sound Deluxe, and that's where I met a lot of my friends at the Help Network. And that's where I discovered about video game music and designing sound effects. And I started in the business doing what's called like musical sound design, which is basically designing original sounds and music kind of things for composers, which is kind of a composer for modern dance. Oh, cool. Antonio, are you in Spain right now? Nice. No, working in Minnesota. Okay, cool. Nice. Okay, cool. Anyway, so yeah, so then I got back to LA and I started assisting some other composers in film and in video games, and that's where I really saw how far that technology had come. And I mean, every day it's changing. And I don't know if there's any other gamers out there, but I love writing music for video games because it's such a creative and technical challenge. And so, all right, so without further ado, boring me about my history here, let's just get, I'm gonna try and start my little presentation here. And okay, here we go. And like I said, I'll stop maybe after like 2 or 3 pages of my little presentation, and shoot me any Q&A questions over there, and then I'll, just because I get bored of hearing myself talk, I will just jump on some Q&A stuff. Hold on. Bear with me. Okay, share screen. Of course, the one thing that I want to share is not there, so hold on. Let's see. Close this. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, now back to Zoom. So sorry, hold on. This is my personal space. Home. Okay, I've seemed to have lost the Zoom page. Hold on 1 sec. Hold on 1 second, guys. Just exit. Oh, there we go. I was on minimal video. Okay, still getting used to this. Okay, so now let's try and screen share it. Basic. No, there's the desktop. Hold on 1 sec. It's not allowing me to screen share my one Google screen. Hold on. Maybe if I pull that up. Thanks for bearing with me, everyone. Let's try again. Oh, I think that's it. Yeah. Okay, before I get into that, got an early question from Stephen Bennett. Okay, I'm gonna ask a question. What's your setup like for video game composing? It's a good question. Basically, you can see my setup behind me here. So basically, this is my composition setup here. I've got my main digital audio workstation, which is Digital Performer. And then I have a few slave computers, what they're called, which run my sample libraries. I've got like 3 other sampling computers. And so basically I just run everything through that. The actual interactive part is a different program. There's like a middleware solution, which I'll get into in my talk a little bit. And then over here is my Steinway piano that I compose at. I feel like for themes and things like that, it's great to have something acoustic in the room. So hopefully that answers your question, Stephen. Okay, so now let's try and broadcast. Cool. Share. All right. So once I pull that up, I can't see the chat window, like I said, anymore. So, but I can see the Q&A window. So if you want to ask a question there, hopefully everyone is seeing this screen, the presentation here. How can it work? Cool. Anyway, like I said, the kind of angle I'm going at here is music for modern media. There's so many different types of media. There's, film music, like I said, video game music, film trailers, webinars, all this stuff, different content requires, for different audiences and things like that. They all have their unique challenges and rewards. So let's see. The artistic and technical differences composing music for different media, film, TV, games. I've pretty much done all media, and I love them all. And I love jumping around genres. It just kind of gets me excited. In case you don't know, some of my credits, you can go on IMDb, but I'm probably most well known for a lot of my video game work, including Metal Gear Rising, Revengeance. I did a bunch of music for Fortnite not too long ago. Worked on Warhammer, and going way back to Lost Planet 1 and 2 with Capcom. And that's just a little sampling of what I've done there. Done a lot of work with Asian clients, which I love. I just actually branded, if you guys have Samsung phones, I just branded for the third year, not consecutively, but for the third year, all their Samsung phone branding. So there's a song called Over the Horizon. So if you go into the phone, you could kind of hear what I've done. They just are releasing that, I think they just did for this year. I've also, I do a lot of independent films, and I love that. And then I've also assisted, I have not yet had my own TV show, but I've assisted a lot of guys doing additional music for TV shows like Homeland, Ray Donovan, Revolution, things like that. And then I have, like I said, what's not listed here is I have done a lot of commercial work. I've done a lot of trailer work with some buddies. And yeah, but I prefer, personally, I prefer like long form composing, because you have a little bit longer time period to kind of get thematic material and go through that and really develop themes over the course of a longer project. And that's what my favorite thing to do. If you have any questions, I have an email down here. Write that down for yourselves, and feel free, yeah, to shoot me any questions, or you could go through the Halp network to, have them ask me questions. But that's my personal email right there. So you're welcome to ask me questions there. Cool. Okay, so, all right, before I jump on, anyone have any questions before I get into the differences between traditional, which is like film scoring, versus modern media, video games, AR, VR? Which software synthesizer do you use for strings and orchestra stuff? I'm getting from. So I basically have, like I said, my digital audio workstation, DAW, which is digital performer. And so basically that's where everything is sequenced in. Then I have my two computers running VE Pro, which is basically a host software for software synthesizers. And yeah, most of the things when I'm composing is in the box, but I do love to work with live musicians. I also conduct my own orchestra stuff when the budgets are there. And so that's a super fun thing to do, is just have live musicians breathing life into the stuff that you write. What else? I mean, I have basically every sample library under the sun. Any other questions before I move on? Oh, what audio editing? I think I just answered that. I use that. I mean, I do use Pro Tools as well, but I only use it really when I'm recording live musicians at other studios, and then I bring it back here and edit that. Okay, so hold on, I'm gonna move this Q&A for a second so I can see what I'm talking about. So traditional versus modern media. The traditional is like linear storytelling. The audience is watching. Music is always going to play the same, when you're watching a film, traditional film or TV show, it's always going to play the same time, the same way that you're watching the scene. Obviously, user can't change the music. And then we get into video games, which is, there are those cutscenes that are kind of cinematic, but the main bulk of it is adaptive storytelling, meaning as you're going through and playing a game, the music is changing depending on what you're actually doing. So the player has some control, or a lot of control, depending on how you code the music. There's a lot of technology behind that. And there's a lot of ways to approach it. It really depends on what you want to do storytelling-wise. Let's see. One of the downsides of that is that the music can get repetitive and boring. So say you have like a 2-minute music loop and you're just standing there in the game and not moving anywhere. Well, the music's going to keep looping over and over again until you do something new, which can get boring. Okay, let's see. Okay. Oops, sorry. There we go. Big difference, like I said, between film, TV, music, and games is the linear approach for films. What I write there, even if it's a Christopher Nolan film with crazy dreams within dreams and alternate timelines, the film and music playback is the same every time. And yeah, well, I just talked about that. Adaptive music. It really is limitless, what you can do with adaptive music in video games. And I'm going to go into that. All right, so before I play this, let me just make sure everyone's still with me here. I need Q&As. Visual performer, hi Ben. Send. Oh, yeah, so yeah, hold on. Okay, so hopefully you guys will be able to hear this. Here's an early version of adaptive music. I'm sure you guys all know Super Mario Brothers. Very, very small amount of music, but very powerful in influence. I mean, because it's just a great piece of music. And but that was like MIDI, so it was basically the music was triggered to use the actual hardware that was built into the Nintendo, and use that. So that's why it's it's the early bleeps and blips. I'll just play for fun. I did not write this, obviously. There we triggered a new loop. And a new one. Cool. All right. So there was like 3 pieces of music there. There's the general Mario Brothers theme, and then the time is running out theme gets triggered at one point, and then when you hit the flagpole, a 3rd piece of music, the success music. And that's kind of the early rudimentary. There's just 1 piece of music triggered at one event, and the technology only allowed for that at that time. So hold on a sec. Let's see if I can check back to the Q&As. Okay. I'm going to stop the share for 1 second. Checking the chat. Oh, cool. Okay. Okay, so now I can see the chat window, and everyone everyone could hear the audio on the Nintendo thing and myself at the same time, or no? Yes, good. Awesome, that's great to hear. It's working. Very cool. Okay, so I'm gonna start it back up again. There we go. All right, so here's an example of a game that I actually did compose, Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance from Konami, and it was very, it was kind of a spin-off of the original Metal Gear games, but very frantic and very violent, and probably not appropriate for you, Ben. And okay, so there I wrote, 200 minutes of music, not including what I call stems. And so stems, basically, okay, I'll talk about the differences of stems in film music and stems in video game music. Stems in film music, what we do often is once I compose, say I've composed a big action score and I've got live orchestra, I've got synthesizers, I've got huge drums, I've got vocals. So basically, at the very last part of a film mix, where you mix everything with dialogue, sound effects, and all that kind of stuff, there's a lot of sound kind of competing for itself. So you deliver what's called stems. So I break out each one of those, the orchestra, the synthesizers, the drums into 10 stems that I give to the mixing stage. And then say, for example, the drums were clashing with like the banging sounds of metal robots or something like that. So then they would duck. They would have control on the mixing stage to kind of duck certain sounds out of frequency ranges in order to make the mix more impactful and clear. And so the difference between that and stems for an adaptive music, a game or a VR game or whatever, is that basically we're thinking more, now it's doing that same kind of concept, but it's doing it live and real time within the game engine. And I'll talk about that in a second, but basically say you're walking towards a boss, like in the video game. And so as you're getting closer, the music is kind of ramping up in intensity. There's a lot of ways to do that. You can have one stem that's kind of a low intensity stem, and then it'll crossfade with a medium intensity, either by layering or by crossfading into a new cue. A lot of different ways to do it. But so you're thinking, when I say length of music, 200 minutes, not including stems. So like those 200 minutes of music that I wrote, each one of them had like 3 main like stems. And so really it's, 600 or 800 minutes of music in the game that can translate to a lot more flexibility and things like that. Now what they do to implement music like that in a video game is, it's, like I said, it's very technology driven. There's middleware audio engines, which kind of, in this case, it was a audio engine called Wise. And you can download these music things like Wise for free, actually, and kind of play around with them. So if anyone wants to get into either sound effects for games or music for games, I encourage you to download them and see what they're capable of. Hold on one sec, checking Q&A. No Q&A is okay. Anyone have any questions before I move on the Q&A? No. Oh, someone does. Sarah Lopez. I'm finishing my master's in composition for media at NYU. Awesome, that was my second school. I almost went to NYU. That was my second choice. Would you say it's important to be in LA to get in the business? Now, it depends what type of business you're talking about. Are you talking about film music or video game music? Because I would say if you want to get into film music or TV, then yes, it's very helpful. Now there are shows being done in New York. New York is probably the other main hub for doing films and TV. So I would say either one of those two cities are the best to be in for film and TV music. For video games, it is spread out all over the world. So you don't really need to be in LA for that, for sure. I mean, there's just, video games are a massive industry worldwide. And, you know, now with this COVID thing, going to be even bigger, I think, because you can get remote teams and you don't have to have live actors a lot of the times. So there's already been a spike in gaming. Okay, let's see, someone else had in the game world, who or what roles are often your point persons, Cynthia asked. Yes, you're correct. It's usually a sound director or a music director that's at the game company. Usually that person is in themselves a composer or comes from that background. So yes, that's who it is. You know, sometimes it's the producer that is working in conjunction with a music director, but they like to be very hands-on there. You know, I find directors often have strong musical tastes. Okay, Sarah asks, so what about, how do you go about entering the video game world? Sarah asked. Good question. There's many ways to go about it, but there's so many like independent games being done now all over the place. So I would just try and find like an independent game companies. Maybe if there's some people where you live that you can go visit, or just, you know, even like joining mod communities and things like that, and offering to maybe practice video game music by, you know, providing music for their mods and things like that. Russell asked, for composing loopable music, what is your workflow methodology technique? Good, that's a great question. So loopable music, for you guys that don't know, it means it starts at one point and then at the end of the piece of music, it's got to loop back and be seamless. So yes, we do that all the time in game music, where yeah, where it's got to seamlessly go back and play over and over again, tons of times. What is the workflow? The thing that I discovered a while back is basically I compose, say it's a minute piece of music. Well, I compose that minute and then I let the reverb tail kind of go out at the end. And then I just basically copy and paste so they overlap. And then I export the middle chunk. And I found that that works very well to export a seamless loop. Basically no clicks or anything like that. Anonymous attendee, do you find any kind of disproportionate between budget for game music and often insane scope of deliverables? Not exactly sure. Usually, you know, video games, well, I guess it depends on what you're talking about, insane scope of deliverables. You mean like giving so many stems? You kind of like, you know, think about that when you're giving a quote to do a video game. You think about how long it's going to take you to do all these additional stems, and you build that into what kind of a timeline you're going to do. What is this? Chat. All right, so I'll move on. Let's see. What does adaptive music mean? I've already talked about this. You get closer to the end boss, the music gets more intense. these are just examples of the way that you could, in a Western game, if you go into the saloon and you shoot the piano player, then the music stops playing. I've seen that done in games. It's fun because then it's like you're a part of the game world, and also you're able to change the audio, like by shooting the piano player. Let's see. The best adaptive music is music that changes continually to give the player an amazing cinematic and emotional connection to the game. No matter what the player does in the game, the music reacts accordingly to make their experience personalized and immersive. Yeah, that's where, you know, game and interactive music is at its best, for sure. Oh, okay, so this one, I'll try and skip a little bit because it's a little, this is, oops, this is a cue that I wrote for Metal Gear Rising, and you'll hear, anyway, let's talk about it afterwards, but you'll hear kind of where the things change as you're progressing and getting more intense in the battle.
They have a Metal Gear? Here? Right. They got that you and get that. Catch that missile before it falls. Use flame mode to damage its armor. Use your ninja run to deflect those shots.
Classic. Almost to the big change.
Now, right. Bring it down. Stop that flame. Break it wide open. Very good. But
Okay, someone texted me that it was hard to hear the music in that one. Hold on. Sorry about that, you guys. I wonder, audio's rough on that one. Sorry about that. Anyway, I'll fix that for next time. I wonder if there's a way to share computer sounds. All right, let me just do a real quick test. I'll skip to the end of that and tell me if this sounds a little better, you guys. If I just skip to the end, get ready. If it works, it should be a lot louder.
your show. Very good. But do not rest easy.
Okay, that was better. Okay, good. Nice. It's just like this one button on Zoom when I share. It has to be checked. Share computer sounds. Makes sense. Before, I guess it was just coming through the microphone. Okay, good to know. Good to know. It goes with everything, Stephen Bennett. Yeah. Rules of nature goes with everything. A little meme I got out of that one. Okay, cool. So let me go back to the screen share now. Cool. Here's like a few screenshots of these game audio engines that I was talking about. Wise, Fmod, Unreal Engine, things like that. Like I said, I think you can download a lot of them for free to kind of play around with. They're very complicated and powerful, like super powerful. Kind of went over this kind of stuff, but this is like a little graphic of how like Super Mario works. Like you said, main theme, looping. In the case of Super Mario Brothers, it's actually MIDI, which is musical interface, digital interface, music instrument digital interface. Been around a long time. So like I said, it was just within the actual hardware. Then you level finish, jump on flagpole, blah, blah, blah. This is kind of how that Metal Gear Rising example that I just played worked. You start at like the low intensity, as it's very, it's loud, that one fight, but in a less loud example, you would hear this more clearly. Low intensity, medium intensity, high intensity. And they're crossfading depending on what's going on with the player. If you're getting closer to the boss, it keeps raising in intensity levels. Then there's a transition music, and then this is where rules of nature kicks in. Once that blade comes down, then it triggers that, and yeah. And then at any point during there, if the player dies, then you didn't hear it there, but then it would trigger basically a player dies piece of music that would happen instantaneously, and you had to just make sure that it seamlessly works with whatever it's coming out of. And then, yep, killing the boss. Okay, so here is maybe, this is music for a Spider-Man video game that I did. I'll show you kind of, oops, sorry. Here we go. Here's, I'll start with the lower intensity, and you have to imagine that this is like a boss battle, or getting, more into the heat of battle. We'll start with the lower intensity, and then I'll just play a little bit of that, and then medium, and then high, and you could kind of hear the differences. Imagine they would crossfade, basically. Okay, here we go. Cool. Okay, now let's try and get out of that. Now medium. and then the highest intensity. So now we're going to add some like melodic elements. You know, in video games, you've got to be careful about being too melodic all the time, because then the listener's ear gets tired. But you save that kind of stuff for, you know, the highest intensity, if that's what you want to do. Anyway, here's. Anyway, there we go. Let me stop the share for a second. Everyone's hearing that? Yes? Okay. Cool. Nice. Let me check. Anyone have any questions? I'm almost to the end of my little talk, but let's see. Rasul, can you elaborate a bit on tempo ramping versus rhythm changes? Okay, so if you're talking about video game music, tempo ramping, usually you're composing to a grid. So you choose like a beats per minute, and you have to tell the game audio engine, say you're composing at 100 beats per minute. Well, you tell the game audio engine that. And then you tell it that every bar, say, is like a crossfade point. So you could crossfade from low intensity to middle intensity every bar, and only on like the downbeat to the next bar, which, you know, that's why it's best to compose video game music in a grid at a specific BPM. Now, it doesn't always have to be like that. You know, there's times when you want it to be more fluid musically, and that has its own effect. But as far as switching between stems and things like that, it's really helpful to stay on a grid versus rhythm changes. Now, you could say, you know, you don't want to go from one cue into a faster tempo cue. That's very easy to do as well. You just basically tell it to trigger a new cue. And then that new cue will be at a higher tempo or in a different kind of rhythmic set. Can you talk about how important it is for a composer to learn something like Wise, or to work with someone to implement it for you? Okay, so that's a great question. I would say you should know what the audio engine is capable of doing. I don't personally code Wise for all my games. Usually the person at the game company, the sound or music director, is in charge of that. Now, some composers get really in depth with that and code or hire like an assistant to code that kind of stuff, and I've done that in the past. But I feel like as long as you kind of tinker around with it or know the capabilities and what like every new iteration of that coming out can do, and stay up on top of that kind of knowledge, then you'll have something more to talk about the audio direct with, and talk about the possibilities of what you can do to enhance the interactivity and the playability of that. So that answers your question. Let me just show you just the end of my little presentation here, and then we'll chat. Okay, back here. Getting the hang of this now a little bit. Oh, has anyone seen Bandersnatch from Black Mirror Bandersnatch on Netflix? I think it's still up there. Yes, played. So that, I thought it was a really, if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it. Basically, it's like if you guys used to read Choose Your Own Adventure books, where it has a bunch of different endings. It's like that for video, basically. So they've filmed a lot of different pathways to get through the show. And so there's, I know people like watch it and try and get to all the endings. I personally, I always used to like kind of skip to the end and like just read the endings. But anyway, highly recommend it. And I feel like a lot of entertainment is kind of crossing that boundary between traditional media, film and TV, and video game interactive. So that it's a very, with all like the crowdsourcing kind of stuff going on right now, and then this, like where people can choose what happens next in a TV show, depending on popular, votes and things like that. I feel like that kind of thing is getting more and more popular and is going to be here to stay. So blurring the lines of traditional and modern entertainment is very interesting to me. Okay, I'll just show you these guys' reactions to Bandersnatch, like a bunch of gamers. I think it's funny. Ooh, okay. Hello.
I'm so excited for this.
This is an interactive film where you make choices which alter the story. Throughout your viewing, there will be moments where choices will be presented at the bottom of the screen.
What?
Use left and right on the controller to highlight your selection, then press OK. Keep your controller in hand.
What? Oh, it's vibrating.
Do you
What?
understand?
Yes. Oh. Yeah. Oh wait, is this an... No. What? Yeah, bro. What? Yeah. Oh my god. What a trip. Already.
Good luck again. Sounds thrilling. How about you decide what
What? What? What should we do? Let's do Frosties? Frosties, yeah. Frosties. What?
Oi!
I wonder what that did. I wonder what that did to the future. I know, right?
Okay, all right. Well, it just goes on and on, but wonder what that did to the future. That's funny. Okay, well, that's basically my little spiel there about music is just touching the surface of all this kind of stuff. But anyway, I hope you guys gained something of an insight out of that. And if you have any more Q&A questions to ask me, I'm here. So go at it. Or like I said, you could also email me any questions in the future. But yeah, thank you guys for joining, and everyone. Cynthia asked, can you give examples of creative freedom times versus being directed exactly what was needed? Creative freedom times. Do you mean, Cynthia, do you mean creative freedoms like with the type of music that you're composing, or do you mean, what exactly do you mean versus being directed exactly? I mean, I think the role of a composer is like where you had more freedom to give ideas for interactivity. Yes, all the time. So that's what I was saying is, if you know the kind of what can work within a game engine, you could also suggest different ways to approach, using the engines or using music in general to elicit, emotional responses, from the audience. And so, yes, I would say, giving an example, let me see. Sometimes, like, instead for, I can't remember any specific time but I know sometimes you want to like, instead of maybe getting to a boss battle, instead of going for that like, super in your face kind of sound, maybe we pull back and maybe we take the sound effects out and get more creative with like a more ambient kind of sound to, you know, affect the emotional state a little bit more. And yeah, suggesting like, oh, maybe we don't want everything to clash sound-wise all the time. Like maybe this is a music moment. Maybe it's no music and just like a raw sound effect moment. Like sometimes silence is more powerful in a project than, you know, just having wall-to-wall music for sure. So you got to make these decisions, and it's a creative team effort with all this stuff. Rasul asked, with video game composition, do you mostly receive written scripts or interactive demos? So video game stuff, yeah, it's often just like they're working on the game concurrently with when you're composing it. Oftentimes I'll just get like basically a spreadsheet of the type of music that needs to be written. So you have to use your imagination a lot. Sometimes I'll get early video kind of footage, but that's kind of a rarity. So I would say most of the time it's like a picture, use your imagination, because they're still working on, you know, concepts. There's concept art is, you know, usually there from the beginning. So, and for film music, usually composers are brought in at the last minute and under very tight deadlines on films. It's kind of a rare thing to get a project from the script stage. Usually we're like the last thought on a project. So we don't have a lot of time. So it's a very, you know, it's stressful and high octane business. You know, but the audio director gives direction. Yes, of course. Yeah, there's very specific kind of either temp music, and that's a whole nother talk that we won't even get to, but there's, you know, temp music that they like and that they've kind of been putting in or referencing things that they like, and then you have to kind of navigate those waters. But yeah, I think that's a whole nother talk. Cool. Well, anyway, I've had a great time with you guys, and look forward to the next one. Thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your week, and stay safe.